Her father's debt was $8 million. She was the payment. Every nightmare begins with something ordinary. A phone call in the middle of the night. A voice you recognize saying words that don't make sense. A moment when your entire future collapses into a single, impossible choice. Amina, 19 years old. Pre-med, top 5% of her class. 3 medical school acceptances. A future built on brilliance and determination. She had 48 hours of that future left. She almost didn't answer. Later, she'd wish she hadn't. On the other end of that line, her father. Crying. Begging. Confessing to sins that would cost her everything. $8 million. That's what he owed. Gambling debts across 6 different organizations. He'd borrowed from loan sharks, triads, syndicates, anyone stupid enough to give a desperate man money. He'd promised he could pay it back. He'd lied. And when the debts came due, when the men with guns arrived at their home, her father made a deal. A terrible, unforgivable deal. He sold his daughter to save his own life. The man who bought her was Chairman Han. 68 years old. Crime lord. Kingpin of Black Lotus City. A monster who'd built an empire on corpses and fear. And in 3 days, she'd become his wife. She had 18 hours to decide. Run and let her family die. Or surrender herself to a man she'd never met, in a city she'd never seen, for a crime she didn't commit. But what none of them knew, not her father, not the monsters who'd claimed her, not even Amina herself, was that the girl boarding that plane to Black Lotus City would never return. Because sometimes, survival demands you become someone else entirely. Welcome to Afro-Korean Storyist, Lovies. We just hit 21 subscribers. Thank you for your amazing support. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Stay with me as we unfold a powerful story of sacrifice, danger, and survival. This is a journey you don't want to miss. Let's dive in. They had one day together. One day to say goodbye. One day to pretend this wasn't happening while knowing absolutely that it was. Her mother begged her to run. Her brothers didn't understand why their sister had to leave. And her father sat in silence, drowning in the cowardice that had destroyed them all. Her mother wanted to fight. Wanted to take the whole family and disappear into the countryside, into another country anywhere. But they all knew the truth. Men like Chairman Han don't lose. They hunt. They find. They make examples. Her father had gambled away their safety. Had borrowed from monsters and expected mercy. Had played games with money he didn't have, chasing wins that never came. And when the bill arrived, he'd paid it with his daughter. Her brother made promises. Said when he was older, when he was strong enough, he'd come for her. He'd save her. He'd make the bad men pay. She told him no. Told him to live. To be good. To take care of their mother. To forget about her. Because heroes die young in stories like this. The youngest didn't understand. Thought his sister was going on an adventure. Thought she'd come back with presents and stories. He drew her pictures to take with her. She took them all. The hours collapsed. Afternoon became evening. Evening became night. And the car was coming. Everything she'd worked for. Every dream. Every plan. All of it meaningless now. The future she'd built with sweat and sacrifice erased. She didn't know why she kept the medical school acceptance letter. Maybe as a reminder of who she was. Or maybe as kindling for the rage she'd need to survive. And then, the car arrived. Her mother held her like she could keep her safe through grip strength alone. Her brothers begged her to stay. And her father finally found words. "I'm sorry." She didn't answer. Just looked at him with eyes that had already learned to hate. Then she walked out the door. She didn't know if she'd ever see them again. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The girl they'd just said goodbye to was already gone. And whoever returned from Black Lotus City, if anyone returned at all, would be someone else entirely. The flight from Nairobi to Black Lotus City takes 14 hours. 14 hours alone in a metal tube flying toward a life she didn't choose. 14 hours to think. To break. To transform. They'd given her a palace in the sky. As if expensive seats would make her forget she was cargo. And that's when the fear truly hit. Alone. 30,000 feet above the earth, flying toward a monster she'd seen only in photographs. No escape. No options. No hope. She looked at pictures of her brothers, her mother, even her father. Memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Because it did. That Amina was dead. She died the moment she stepped onto this plane. Somewhere over the Indian Ocean, between one breath and the next, Amina made a choice. She could arrive broken, terrified, easy to control, easy to destroy. Or she could arrive as something else. Something harder. Something that might survive what was coming. She practiced not feeling. Practiced the mask she'd need to wear. Practiced being stone instead of flesh. Because flesh breaks. Flesh bleeds. But stone endures. Black Lotus City. 7 million people. Skyscrapers piercing clouds. Beautiful. Deadly. Built on blood and ambition. And somewhere down there, her future waited. She'd spent 14 hours preparing. 14 hours transforming. 14 hours building walls around her fear. But as the plane rolled to a stop on a private runway, as she saw the black sedan waiting on the tarmac, as reality crashed back in, she realized that no amount of preparation could ready you for walking into hell. Especially when hell knew you were coming. Black Lotus City at night looked like a fever dream. Neon everywhere. Chinese characters blazing in pink and blue and gold. Street vendors. Traffic. Humanity packed so tight you could feel the pulse of it. Beautiful. Overwhelming. Alien. The deeper you went, the more the truth revealed itself. The crowds thinned. The buildings grew taller. The streets grew cleaner. This wasn't just a city. It was a kingdom with layers. And she was heading to the very top. The first checkpoint had 8 guards. Automatic weapons. Barriers that could stop a truck. They weren't protecting a home. They were protecting a fortress. They knew who she was. Expected her. She was inventory arriving for inspection. And then she saw it. Chairman Han's compound. 12 acres in the heart of the city. Walls that could withstand a siege. Gardens that looked like paintings. A mansion that belonged in magazines. It looked like a dream. It was a nightmare dressed in beauty. They didn't offer her an umbrella. First test. Chief Rena Park. Head of security. Former military. Rumors said she'd killed 23 men in service. Rumors said it was closer to 50. No one asked. Everyone knew she was the most dangerous person in any room except the one Chairman Han occupied. She didn't speak at first. Just circled. Looked for weakness. Looked for cracks. Looked for anything she could exploit or eliminate. Rena laid out the rules. The hierarchy. The consequences. Address her as Chief Rena. Address him as Chairman Han or Sir. Understand that ignorance won't save you. Neither will tears. Neither will defiance. Only intelligence. Only adaptation. Only absolute obedience. And in that moment, Rena saw something. A spark. A refusal to completely break. Most women arrived destroyed already. But this one still had fight in her. That was either promising or dangerous. Maybe both. The walk through the mansion was a lesson in power. Every corridor perfect. Every piece of art worth more than houses. Guards at intervals, 17 just in the main wing. Each one capable of killing her before she could scream. Each one watching her like wolves watch rabbits. No family photos. No personal touches. No sign that humans actually lived here. This wasn't a home. It was a headquarters. A command center. A fortress that happened to have bedrooms. Rena gave her final advice. Chairman Han doesn't waste words. Answer directly. Don't elaborate. Don't lie, he can smell lies in your sweat. And whatever you do, don't show fear. Fear invites cruelty. Fear makes you pray. And prey doesn't last long in this house. Then Rena said something strange. Something almost respectful. She said most women break within days. But Amina might be different. Different enough to survive. Maybe even different enough to matter. Chairman Han. 68 years old. Silver hair. Scars on knuckles from a lifetime of violence. Face weathered by time and sin. Eyes that had watched empires rise and fall. Eyes that had seen men die and forgotten them by dinner. He told her to come in. Told her they needed to discuss the terms of her captivity. For 30 seconds, he didn't turn. Didn't acknowledge her. A power play. Making her wait. Making her feel small. Making her understand that in this room, in this house, in this city, she was nothing. And he was everything. And whatever happened next would define whether she survived the night. Time slows when you're afraid. Seconds stretch into hours. Every heartbeat feels like thunder. Amina stood there, soaked and shivering, while Chairman Han stared at his kingdom and let the silence do its work. 30 seconds. That's how long he made her wait. 30 seconds to feel small. To feel powerless. To understand the distance between them. He was the king on his mountain. She was the sacrifice at the gates. He asked if they'd offered her an umbrella. A strange, mundane question. She said no. He told her it was a test. Chief Rena testing to see if she'd complain. Testing for softness. Testing for weakness. And then she saw him clearly for the first time. Not a photograph. Not a news article. The actual man. Silver hair swept back. Strong jaw carved by time and violence. Scars on his hands, fighter's hands. And eyes. God, those eyes. Dark. Intelligent. Empty of mercy. Eyes that calculated value and found most people wanting. He asked if she was soft. If she would break easily. If she was worth the $8 million he'd paid for her. She told him she was still standing. Bold. Stupid. Brave. All three. And for a moment, just a flicker, something like approval crossed his face. Then it vanished. Back to stone. Then he told her the truth. All of it. No mercy in the telling. Her father had borrowed from 6 different organizations. Had played them against each other. Had gambled away $11 million. Han had settled it all for $8 million. Bought out the other lenders. Made them disappear, and the way he said disappear made it clear what he meant. And in exchange for clearing those debts, for saving her family from dismemberment and shallow graves, Han had claimed her. Not as a mistress. Not as a servant. As property. As legal, binding compensation. He explained the legality. The binding contracts. The fact that her father had signed over power of attorney. That in 6 countries, their marriage would be recognized. That she had no rights. No recourse. No escape. She was his. Permanently. Irrevocably. Completely. Then came the rules. The terms of her captivity dressed as marriage. 3 days until the wedding. Traditional ceremony. 5 major crime families attending. She'd wear red silk. She'd smile appropriately. She'd bow appropriately. She wouldn't cry. She'd be perfect, or her family would pay for her imperfection with their lives. Chief Rena would train her. Language. Customs. Self-defense. She'd obey completely. She'd learn or die trying. Simple. Brutal. Clear. She'd live in the suite next to his. The connecting door would lock from her side. He wouldn't force himself on her. Wouldn't enter without permission. Wouldn't touch her until she chose it herself. She'd expected rape. Expected violence. Expected to be used and broken immediately. This confused her. Was it mercy? Strategy? A different kind of cruelty, giving her the illusion of choice while removing all actual choices? He told her why with the honesty of a man who didn't need to lie. He had no interest in rape. It was inefficient. Fear made people stupid, and he needed her functional. Besides, he said with a smile that made her blood freeze, willing surrender was far more satisfying than forced compliance. Then the threats. The real ones. The update promises of what would happen if she refused. If she failed. If she chose death over obedience. Her mother would die first. Slowly. Tortured for information she didn't have. Then her brothers. The 13-year-old beaten. The 9-year-old sold to markets that specialized in children. And her father, kept alive for years. Decades. Suffering. Knowing what had happened to his family because of his weakness. And there it was. The trap closing completely. She could die. Could refuse. Could choose martyrdom. But it wouldn't just be her life. It would be her mother's screams. Her brother's innocence destroyed. Her father's mind broken by guilt. They'd all die because she chose pride over survival. She said yes. Said she understood. Said she'd obey. The words tasting like poison but coming anyway because what choice did she have? He welcomed her to Black Lotus City. Told her not to disappoint him. Then went back to his paperwork as if she were already gone. And that was it. The deal sealed. The cage locked. She belonged to him now. Mind, body, future. All of it his property. His possession. His wife in 3 days. But here's what Chairman Han didn't know. What no one in that house knew. What Amina herself didn't fully understand yet. Amina Kato had spent 19 years surviving. Surviving poverty. Surviving her father's failures. Surviving academic competition brutal enough to break stronger people. She'd learned that survival wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the bravest. Survival was about being the most stubborn. About refusing to stay broken. About getting up one more time than you got knocked down. And Chairman Han had just made the mistake of thinking one conversation, one night of fear, would be enough to break her permanently. He'd bought himself a debt bride. A captive. A victim to mold and control. But what he'd actually purchased was something far more dangerous, a woman with absolutely nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And in 3 days, when she walked down that aisle in red silk, she wouldn't just be surrendering. She'd be declaring war. The quiet kind. The patient kind. The kind that ends with either freedom or corpses. The suite they'd prepared for her was larger than her family's entire home. Master bedroom with a bed that could fit 4 people. Sitting room with furniture that belonged in palaces. Bathroom with heated floors and a tub the size of a small pool. Luxury designed to make you forget you were a prisoner. But it was still a cage. Just a beautiful one. Rena showed her the connecting door to Han's quarters. Told her it locked from her side. Told her he meant what he said, he wouldn't enter without permission. Then Rena said something surprising. She said fear makes you weak, and Han needs you strong. That's why he gives this illusion of control. Not mercy. Strategy. Rena told her to sleep. Said training started at 5 a.m. Said tomorrow would be the hardest day of her life, and then the day after would be harder still. Said it without cruelty. Just fact. Just the truth of survival in this place. And then she was alone. Truly alone for the first time since the phone call that destroyed her life. No family. No friends. No familiar faces. Just her and the silence and the crushing weight of what was coming. 7 million people in this city. 7 million lives. And she'd never felt more isolated. More trapped. More fundamentally alone. She didn't recognize herself. That girl in the reflection looked like a ghost. Like someone who'd already died and just hadn't stopped moving yet. The water was hot. Almost scalding. She stood under it until her skin turned red. Trying to wash away the day. The fear. The shame. The feeling of hands she'd never felt but knew were coming. Trying to wash away the fact that she'd agreed. That she'd said yes. That she'd become property to save people who'd sacrificed her. And there, in a shower worth more than her education, she broke. Completely. Finally. Sobs that tore from her chest like animals escaping. Screams muffled by water. Every emotion she'd held back exploding in a deluge of grief and rage and terror. But here's the thing about breaking completely. About hitting rock bottom. There's nowhere left to fall. And when you're at the very bottom, the only direction left is up. She'd cried out the girl from Nairobi. The medical student. The daughter and sister and dreamer. That girl drowned in a luxury shower in Black Lotus City. And what emerged was something else. Something that had to be to survive. A phone. A gift and a leash. And a note that changed everything. He'd given her communication. Limited. Controlled. Monitored. But real. She could hear their voices. Know they were alive. Have 15 minutes a week to remember why she was enduring this. She could call now. Right now. Hear her mother's voice. But what would she say? How do you explain this? How do you pretend everything's okay when you're locked in a monster's house wearing silk pajamas that cost more than your family's monthly rent? Sleep wouldn't come easy. Maybe wouldn't come at all. But she had hours before dawn. Hours before training began. Hours to think about the choice she'd made. Hours to decide who she'd become. Would she be the victim they expected? Broken and compliant? Or would she be something else? Something they didn't see coming? Something dangerous? Chairman Han thought he'd bought himself a wife. A possession. A beautiful thing to display and control. But as Amina lay there in the darkness, staring at shadows on the ceiling, she made a promise. Not to him. Not to her family. To herself. She would survive this. She would adapt. She would learn everything they taught her and use it. And one day, when they least expected it, when they thought she was broken and trained and safe, she'd show them exactly what happens when you cage something with nothing left to lose. 5 a.m. came like a sledgehammer. Rena didn't knock. Didn't wait for permission. Just walked in like she owned the space. Because in every way that mattered, she did. Rena threw workout clothes at her. Sports bra. Compression pants. Running shoes. Everything perfectly sized because they'd done their research. Knew everything about her. Weight. Height. Measurements. They'd planned this capture down to her shoe size. 5 minutes to dress. 3 minutes in the bathroom. Then training begins. No breakfast. No coffee. No warm-up. You want soft? Go home. You want to survive? You do exactly as I say, when I say it, how I say it. Questions? She had no questions. Just terror and determination. If this was survival, she'd survive. The gym was in the basement. Of course it was. Everything brutal in this house happened underground. Where screams wouldn't carry. Where blood could be washed away easily. This wasn't a gym for yoga and meditation. This was a training facility. For soldiers. For killers. For people who needed to know how to destroy and survive in equal measure. Rena told her to strip down to sports bra and pants. Needed to assess her physical condition. See what she was working with. See how much work needed to be done to make her functional. Rena's assessment was brutal and honest. No muscle definition. Poor posture. Soft. Weak. Moving like prey, shoulders hunched, eyes down, trying to be invisible. In this world, invisible things get eaten first. But Rena said she was young. Adaptable. Smart. Give her 3 months, she might be dangerous. Give her 3 days, she might at least be presentable. Today's goal, presentable. 2 hours of pure hell. Cardio until her lungs burned. Strength training until her muscles screamed. Posture corrections that felt like being rebuilt from the ground up. Every weakness exposed. Every soft edge filed away. And when she vomited from exertion, Rena didn't comfort her. Just handed her water and said again. Because in this world, your body's limits are suggestions, not boundaries. But here's what Rena didn't expect. Amina didn't quit. Didn't beg for mercy. Didn't cry. She just kept going. Kept standing up. Kept pushing through even when her body begged to stop. Because Amina understood something. This wasn't just training. This was a test. Every moment was a test. And if she failed, if she broke, if she showed she was useless, there was no place in this house for useless things. Rena looked at her differently then. Not warm. Not friendly. But maybe a little bit impressed. Rena told her she'd done well. That most women couldn't finish day 1. That maybe, just maybe, she had the spine needed to survive here. High praise from a woman who didn't give praise easily. Then came the next phase. If physical training was hell, what came next was worse. Mr. Chin. Language tutor. 70 years old. Spoke no English. Communicated through gestures and repetition and sheer stubborn insistence that she learn Mandarin whether her brain cooperated or not. Ni hao. Xie xie. Wuming bai. Basic phrases repeated until they stopped feeling foreign. Until they started to stick. Until her brain rewired itself around sounds it had never made before. And through it all, Rena explained the real curriculum. The 5 allied families. The rival syndicates. The power structure of Black Lotus City's underworld. Who to respect. Who to fear. Who wanted her husband dead. Kenji Sato. Leader of the Jade Dragons. Rival syndicate. 20 years of war with Chairman Han. 15 assassination attempts on both sides. He'd lost his brother in the last major conflict. wanted Han dead more than he wanted to breathe. And Rena made sure Amina understood. As Han's wife, she'd become a target. Not just for assassination. For kidnapping. For leverage. For every horrible thing enemies do to hurt each other through the people they claim to protect. She wasn't marrying into safety. She was marrying into a war zone. This wasn't just about survival. It was about staying alive in a world where people died suddenly. Where violence was currency. Where her existence made her a strategic liability to the man who owned her. Day 1 complete. 2 more until the wedding. 2 more days to transform from victim to whatever she needed to become. She'd survived day 1. The breaking had begun. But as she lay there in the darkness, muscles aching, mind spinning with new languages and cultural rules and photographs of men who wanted to kill her future husband, Amina realized something crucial. They were breaking her down to build her back up. Teaching her to be dangerous because they needed her dangerous. And every skill they gave her, every lesson they taught, every weapon they placed in her hands, they were giving her the tools she'd eventually use against them. They just didn't know it yet. She'd been avoiding it. The phone. The lifeline. The 15 minutes per week of connection to everything she'd lost. But she couldn't avoid it forever. Besides, they needed to know she was alive. Needed to know their sacrifice hadn't been for nothing. Her mother answered on the first ring. Like she'd been waiting by the phone for days. Like she'd been praying to hear her daughter's voice just one more time. They cried together. Across thousands of miles. Across different worlds entirely. Her mother asking if she was okay. Amina lying. Saying yes. Saying she was fine. Saying the house was beautiful and the people were kind and everything was going to be all right. Lies wrapped in love. Her mother told her the debts were gone. The men had stopped coming. Her brothers were back in school. They were safe. Safe because Amina had walked into hell for them. Her brothers wanted to talk. Wanted to know about the airplane. About the big city. About her new husband. They thought it was an adventure. A fairy tale. They didn't understand fairy tales have monsters. And then her father's voice. In the background. Not coming to the phone. Not speaking to her. Just there. A presence. A weight. The man who'd sold her couldn't even face her voice. Her mother made excuses. Said he was ashamed. Said he cried every night. Said he never meant for this. All the things guilty people say when they can't undo what they've done. Amina said nothing. Didn't forgive. Didn't curse. Just nothing. Because some betrayals are too big for words. Time running out. Always running out. 15 minutes per week to hold on to humanity. To remember she was more than property. More than a debt payment. Her mother's voice breaking. Asking if she'd come home. When she'd come home. If she was really okay. Amina told her not to wait. Told her to take care of the boys. Told her to be strong. Told her she loved her. Didn't answer the question about coming home because they both knew the answer. There was no coming home. Home was gone. This was life now. And there it was. 15 minutes of connection. Of love. Of normal life. And then silence. Back to being alone in a fortress. Back to being property. Back to training to survive in a world that wanted to break her. Somewhere out there, her family was eating dinner. Her brothers were doing homework. Her mother was pretending everything was fine. And her father was drowning in guilt that would never be enough. They were safe. Alive. That's what she'd bought with her freedom. But here's what her family didn't know. Couldn't know. Wouldn't understand if she told them. She wasn't just surviving. She was learning. Training. Becoming dangerous. And every day she spent in this house made her harder. Sharper. More capable of the violence they were teaching her. They thought they'd saved her by letting her go. But what they'd actually done was unleash her. Given her motivation. Given her a reason to become whatever she needed to become. And tomorrow, when she walked down that aisle in red silk and became Chairman Han's wife officially, legally, permanently, she wouldn't just be a victim surrendering. She'd be a weapon being loaded. And sooner or later, weapons fire. Wedding day. The day a girl becomes a wife. Usually a celebration. Usually joy. But this was something else entirely. They didn't ask permission. just entered and began transforming her, stripping away the woman she'd been becoming and replacing her with the bride they needed her to be. The dress was red. Traditional Chinese wedding red. Silk that whispered when it moved. Embroidery so detailed it must have taken months. Dragons and lotus flowers woven together in patterns that meant prosperity and power and eternal binding. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. They'd measured her weeks ago. Planned this before she even knew she'd been sold. The dress had been waiting for her. Like a trap waits for prey. The women finally stepped back, surveying their work. Satisfied. They'd turned a frightened 19-year-old into a proper bride for a crime lord. Mission accomplished. Rena told her she looked perfect. Told her to remember everything they'd taught her. Stand straight. Head up. Don't cry. Don't show fear. Smile when appropriate. Bow when appropriate. Be the wife Chairman Han needs her to be. Then Rena said something else. Said that after today, everything changes. Said marriage isn't just ceremony here. It's warfare. It's politics. It's declaring to every power in the city that Amina belongs to Han. That she's under his protection. And his control. Then it was time. The great room had been transformed. Red silk banners hanging from ceiling. Lotus flowers everywhere. Traditional decorations. Beautiful. Suffocating. And in that room, waiting, the most dangerous people in Black Lotus City. The Wu family. The Zhang family. The Lin family. The Qin family. The Huang family. 5 empires represented. Each one allied with Han. Each one assessing whether his new wife was an asset or a liability. And there, among them, a face Amina recognized from photographs. Kenji Sato. The enemy. The rival. The man who wanted Han dead. He'd come to the wedding. Neutral ground. Temporary peace. Assessing the new weakness in Han's armor. And there he stood. The man who owned her. Looking at her not with love or desire but with assessment. She was a business transaction. An $8 million investment. And he was checking if the product met expectations. Every step felt like marching to execution. But she didn't falter. Didn't stumble. Moved like she owned the room even though the room owned her. The ceremony was in Mandarin. She understood perhaps 1 word in 10. Didn't matter. She knew what was happening. Vows being spoken. Promises being made. Bindings being tied that couldn't be undone. She promised obedience. Promised loyalty. Promised to honor and serve. The words tasting like ash, but coming anyway because what choice did she have with her family's lives hanging in the balance? And then it was done. The officiant declaring them married. Bound. Hers to his. His to hers. In sickness and health. In power and war. Until death. Because this wasn't a celebration. This was a declaration. Han claiming his property publicly. Making it known that she was his. Untouchable by others. Protected. Controlled. Owned. She performed beautifully. Several family heads commented on her composure. Her grace. Her intelligence showing through despite the language barrier. Good investment, they said. Han had chosen well. And Kenji. Kenji watched it all. Calculating. Planning. Seeing not a bride, but a target. A weakness. A way to hurt Han where it would matter most. He told her she'd performed well. That the family heads were impressed. That she'd represented his household with dignity. High praise from a man who didn't give praise. He reminded her, door locks from her side. He won't enter. Won't force. But she's his now. Legally. Permanently. His wife. His responsibility. His possession. And then he said something that haunted her. Said welcome to the family. Said try not to disappoint him. Said goodnight, wife. And there she sat. Married to a monster. Wearing silk worth thousands. Surrounded by luxury that felt like chains. The ceremony done. The trap closed completely. She started crying. Then laughing. Then both. Hysteria of survival. Of making it through. Of being alive when part of her expected to die today. She was married now. Mrs. Han. The debt bride. Property and wife and investment all at once. But as she sat there in that wedding dress, in that locked room, in that fortress of a house, something inside her hardened into diamond. Because she'd survived the wedding, survived the ceremony, survived becoming his. And if she could survive that, maybe she could survive anything. Maybe she could even survive long enough to become something they'd all regret creating. The question wasn't whether she'd break. She'd already been broken. The question was what she'd build from the pieces. The wedding is over. The debt is paid. But the real story is just beginning. Because in 3 months, Amina will hold a gun for the first time. In 6 months, she'll save Han's life. And in 1 year, everything will burn. She was bought as a bride. But what she became was a weapon. 3 months. 90 days. 2,160 hours. Every single one spent breaking down who she was and building something else. Something harder. Something that could survive. Chief Rena pushed her past limits she didn't know she had. Every day starting before dawn. Every day ending past exhaustion. Cardio until her lungs burned. Strength training until her muscles screamed. Combat drills until violence became muscle memory. Rena taught her that fair fights are for idiots and corpses. Taught her to fight dirty. To go for eyes, throat, groin, knees. To use someone's momentum against them. To survive, not to win. Because in this world, survival is victory. And language. Hours every day with Mr. Chin. Mandarin characters that made her head hurt. Tones that her tongue couldn't find. Until slowly, painfully, they started to make sense. Until she could understand conversations. Could read contracts. Could navigate Han's world without translation. She learned to read rooms. To spot danger in body language. To identify who had power and who was pretending. To navigate the complex hierarchies of organized crime like she'd been born to it. The soft edges disappeared. The medical student who'd never thrown a punch became someone who could field strip a Glock in under 30 seconds. Who could speak 3 languages. Who could kill with a pen if necessary. Not because she wanted to. Because she had to. Han brought her to meetings. Business meetings where millions moved with handshakes. Strategy sessions where territories were divided. And other meetings. Darker ones. And then came the day Han killed a man in front of her. Wei Lu. Embezzler. Thief. Father of 3. Han shot him between the eyes like swatting a fly. The sound deafening. The blood spreading. The other men at the table continuing the meeting like nothing happened. And Amina didn't scream. Didn't flinch. Didn't show shock. Because Rena had prepared her. Had warned her this would happen. Had taught her that showing weakness invited more violence. So she stayed stone. Stayed cold. Stayed perfect. Han noticed. Of course he noticed. Most people freeze the first time they see death. Most people should. But Amina didn't. And in that moment, something shifted in how he looked at her. Not warmth. Not trust. But interest. Recognition. That night, she found him on the balcony. Asked why he'd brought her to that meeting. Why he'd made her watch. He told her she needed to understand this world if she'd survive it. Needed to see what he was. What they all were. And then he told her something true. Said Wei Lu had 3 children. A wife. A mother. Had thrown it all away for $200,000. Had stolen and expected mercy. And Han had eliminated the disease before it spread. Weakness invites chaos. Mercy invites testing. She asked if he regretted it. Killing. Building an empire on corpses. He said no. Said regret is a luxury for people with choices. He'd had none. Neither did she. So they survived with the tools they had. And in that moment, something cracked in the walls between them. Not breaking. Just cracking. Letting in light. Letting in possibility of something beyond captor and captive. By month 3, she was dangerous. Not deadly. Not yet. But dangerous enough that guards started treating her differently. Not as property. As someone who could hurt them if they weren't careful. Her shooting improved. Draw speed faster. Accuracy better. Rena said in a few more months, she might actually be lethal. High praise from a woman who killed for a living. She didn't recognize herself anymore. The girl from Nairobi was gone. The medical student. The daughter. All of her soft parts carved away by necessity and survival. What remained was harder. Colder. capable of things she'd never imagined. They'd tried to break her. Instead, they'd forged her, turned a prisoner into a weapon, given her skills and knowledge and access to their world. And none of them understood yet that the most dangerous thing you can do is teach your captive how to fight back. Because skills don't have loyalty. And weapons, eventually, turn. The Charity Gala. Annual event. All the major players attending. Legitimate business people rubbing elbows with crime lords. Politicians on criminal payrolls pretending to be philanthropists. Money laundering dressed as charity. Beautiful. Corrupt. Deadly. She'd transformed. No longer the terrified girl who'd arrived 3 months ago. Now she moved like she belonged. Like she was dangerous. Because she was. Han told her she looked dangerous. She said she'd learned from the best. Pride flickered in his eyes. His investment paying dividends. The crowd parted like water. People nodding respectfully, fearfully, to Chairman Han. Staring at Amina with curiosity, calculation, contempt. The new wife. The debt bride. Still proving her worth. She performed perfectly. Gracious. Respectful. Appropriately deferential without being weak. Every phrase Rina had taught her coming naturally now. Every cultural cue read and responded to correctly. She gathered intelligence while appearing casual. Names. Connections. Weaknesses. Storing everything for later. Because in this world, information was power. And she was learning to collect both. And then she saw him. Kenji Sato. The enemy. The man who wanted Han dead. Who'd come to neutral ground to assess. To calculate. To plan. 3 seconds. That's how long she stared back. Long enough to show she wasn't afraid. Not so long as to be provocative. Perfect calibration. Then she turned away like he didn't matter. Han called it brave or foolish. She said he'd taught her to show no weakness. He reminded her that Kenji takes challenges personally. She said then he shouldn't have smiled like that. Hours passed. The danger level stayed high but manageable. Everyone playing by the rules. Neutral ground respected. Temporary peace holding. She was returning from the restroom. Guards beside her. Hundreds of people in the ballroom. Safest she could be in this world. And then everything went to hell. 50 armed men. Kenji's crew. Breaking neutral ground. Violating decades of agreement. Full assault. Everyone a target. Training saved her. Muscle memory. Rina's voice in her head, when chaos erupts, get low, get to cover, weapon ready, assess, move. And then Han's voice. Cutting through chaos. Calling her name. She moves toward his voice. Low. Fast. Professional. Not panicking. Using training. Han ordered Rina to get her out. But Amina refused. Told him not without you. His eyes, surprise, anger, something else. Recognition. And then she saw it. The knife. The attacker. Han wouldn't see him in time. Wouldn't react fast enough. Would die. She didn't think. Didn't debate. Just fired. She'd saved his life. The debt bride. The property. The investment. Had just killed to protect him. No time for processing. More attackers. They fought toward exit. Rina and Han providing covering fire. Amina between them. Protected but not helpless. Her shooting wasn't perfect. But it was effective. And effective keeps you alive. 3 more attackers ahead. Corridor too narrow to avoid. Trapped. The third one saw her. Saw the weakness. Went for her. Body armor. Her shot ineffective. He raised his weapon. Han saved her life. Just as she'd saved his. Equal now. Balanced. Everyone alive. Somehow. Against odds. Through violence and training and luck. The aftermath is when fear finally catches up. When adrenaline fades and reality crashes in. When you realize how close death came. How easily it could have ended. He told her it was Kenji Sato's people. Breaking neutral ground. Violating decades of agreement. Desperate. Because Kenji knew Han was winning. Knew time was running out. She asked about her. Why target her? Han explained she was supposed to be his weakness. A soft target. Someone Kenji could exploit. Someone who'd make Han vulnerable. But instead, She'd killed one of Kenji's men. Saved Han's life. Proven she wasn't weakness. Was something else. Something Kenji hadn't anticipated. Han said she could have run tonight. Could have let him die. Could have taken her freedom. Her family would have stayed safe. He kept his word. Always. So why didn't she run? She didn't know. Couldn't explain. Should have wanted him dead. Should have let him die. But she didn't. And then he asked the question that changed everything. Asked why she was supposed to hate him. Fear him. Should have let him die. And then they kissed. Not rough. Not possessive. Desperate. Like two people drowning finding air. His hands in her hair. Her fingers gripping his jacket. Months of walls collapsing in a moment. He said it was a mistake. She agreed. He said she should go. She agreed. But neither moved. Because the walls were already down. The pretense already shattered. That night, the connecting door stayed open. Not by force. By choice. And somewhere between captive and captor, between fear and desire, between death survived and life reclaimed, they found something neither expected. Something dangerous. Something that felt like falling and flying all at once. But in this world, everything comes with a price. Love. Survival. Connection. And 6 weeks later, when Amina stared at a positive pregnancy test in a marble bathroom, she'd learn exactly how high that price could climb. Because monsters can't raise children. And Chairman Han was about to make a choice that would shake Black Lotus City to its foundations. The signs started small. Nausea that wouldn't quit. Exhaustion bone deep. Emotions swinging wild. She told herself it was stress. The attack. The violence. The shift in her relationship with Han. Anything except the truth. And then her period didn't come. And the truth became unavoidable. Positive. All of them. Undeniable. Impossible to ignore. She was 19 years old. Married to a crime lord. Living in a world of violence and secrets. And pregnant. Fear. Wonder. Terror. All at once. A baby. A life. Something innocent in a world built on blood. How do you bring a child into this? How do you protect something so fragile in a place so dangerous? She had to tell him. No choice. This affected everything. Changed everything. A baby made her vulnerable in ways no weapon could defend against. She told him simply. Directly. No preamble. I'm pregnant. For 30 seconds, he didn't react. Didn't speak. Just stared at her like she'd spoken a language he'd forgotten. And then, he said 4 words that changed everything. I'm getting out. Out of this life, he said. This empire. This world. He was dismantling it. Retiring. Walking away. Because he wouldn't raise his child in this nightmare. He said watch me. Said he'd built this kingdom on corpses and fear. Said he'd done things that would make her sick if she knew details. Said he wouldn't let his child inherit this. Wouldn't let them grow up wondering if their father's enemies would murder them in their sleep. He told her about his first wife. 23 years ago. Killed by Kenji Sato's organization. Revenge for a territory dispute. Made to look like accident. Han knew but couldn't prove it without starting a war that would kill thousands. He'd lived for revenge since then. Built his power. Waited for the perfect moment. But revenge was a disease, he said. Ate you from inside. And he wouldn't let it consume his child. Wouldn't let history repeat. She said she didn't know if she could do this. Be a mother in this world. Raise a child surrounded by violence. He said she wouldn't have to. They'd leave. Singapore maybe. Or Europe. Somewhere clean. Somewhere safe. He promised. Swore. He'd liquidate assets. Set up legitimate businesses. They'd have security, but they'd be free. Their child would grow up normal. Safe. Far from this nightmare. But in Black Lotus City, hope is dangerous. Because the moment you have something to lose, someone will try to take it. Kenji Sato had been planning for months. Waiting for the perfect moment. And Han's weakness, his wife, his unborn child, his desperate desire to walk away, was exactly the opening Kenji needed. In 72 hours, war would come to Chairman Han's doorstep. And this time, it wouldn't be an assassination attempt. It would be total annihilation. The intelligence came through Rena. She'd been monitoring chatter, tracking movements, following money. And what she found was terrifying. Kenji was planning full-scale assault. Not just on Han. On the entire organization. He'd been building alliances, smaller families who resented Han's control, independents who wanted to expand, corrupt police who wanted regime change. A coalition united by one goal: destroy Chairman Han. 200 combatants. Military-grade weapons. Coordinated strikes on multiple locations simultaneously. The compound. Han's businesses. His allied families. Everything. Overwhelming force designed to shatter the Black Lotus organization permanently. Han had 50 guards. Plus whatever allied families could muster, maybe another 100. Against 200 professionals with military weapons. Bad odds. Kenji was betting on overwhelming force. On Han being old and weak. On his new wife making him vulnerable. He ordered Rena to take Amina. Private plane tonight. Singapore. Security already arranged. She'd be safe while he handled this. She refused. Said she wasn't running. Wasn't leaving him to die while she hid. They survived together or not at all. He said that's exactly why she had to fight. Because this baby deserved a father. And she wouldn't let Kenji take that away. Han had spent 3 months training her. Teaching her to survive. To fight. Now she'd use it. Rena broke the stalemate. Said Amina was right. Better to have her where they could protect her than running scared across borders. And honestly, she'd rather have Amina shooting beside her than cowering in Singapore. He agreed. But with conditions. She follows orders. Stays in reinforced positions. And if he tells her to run, she runs. No debate. Then Han made calls. Every guard. Every allied family. Every favor owed. Everyone who'd ever benefited from Black Lotus protection. Calling them in. All of them. If Kenji wanted war, he'd get war. 72 hours of preparation. Every minute critical. Wu family brought port security 40 men. Zhang family brought casino enforcers 30 men. Lin family brought private contractors 20 men. Chen family brought intelligence and corrupt police willing to look away. Huang family brought pure violence, men who lived for exactly this. Amina worked beside Rena. Learning command structure. Memorizing positions. Practicing until her hands moved on instinct. Her pregnancy barely showing, but her determination absolute. The night before war, they didn't sleep. Just held each other. Talked about futures that might never come. About the baby. About names. About a life far from violence. About Singapore or Paris, or anywhere that wasn't here. And as dawn approached, as sensors detected movement at the perimeter, as war came like a storm they couldn't outrun, Amina understood something fundamental. She'd been brought here as property. As payment. As sacrifice. But she'd become something else entirely. She'd become a wife. A warrior. A woman with everything to lose and everything to fight for. And when the first explosion rocked the compound walls, when gunfire erupted like thunder, when hell itself came calling, she didn't freeze. Didn't run. Didn't break. She fought. Because that's what survivors do. They fight until there's nothing left to fight with. And then they fight with what remains. It began at dawn. 50 armed men hitting 3 sides simultaneously. Breaching charges. RPGs, automatic weapons. Military tactics. This wasn't an assassination. This was invasion. Han's defenses activated immediately. Guards returning fire from prepared positions. The walls, designed for exactly this scenario, channeled attackers into kill zones. Overlapping fields of fire. Every approach covered. East wall holding. West wall taking heavy fire but stable. South gate nearly breached but Huang's team intercepted. Professional. Violent. Effective. But Kenji had planned for this. Secondary wave. North section. They came up the cliff, the one direction thought secure. 20 combatants inside the perimeter. Inside the walls. Behind the defenses. Han ordered command center sealed. Don't open for anyone. But Amina grabbed her weapon. Told him she was coming. He started to argue, saw her face, knew it was pointless. They moved out. Han. Rena. Amina. 6 elite guards. The mansion had become battlefield. Bodies in corridors. Smoke. Gunfire echoing from multiple directions. Chaos. Pure chaos. Amina behind marble pillar. Firing controlled bursts. Training taking over. No thinking. Just reacting. Surviving. One guard down. Another taking hit but staying up. Rena moving like death itself, precise, unstoppable. And Han. 68 years old. Fighting like demon. Every movement efficient. Brutal. Decades of violence compressed into pure survival instinct. More explosions. More gunfire. The assault continuing. Wave after wave. Kenji throwing everything at them. Pushing toward North Wing. Where main breach occurred. Where Kenji would be. Because men like Kenji lead from front when everything's on the line. And there he was. Kenji Sato. The enemy. The rival. 20 years of war leading to this moment. This room. This confrontation. Kenji called out to Han. 20 years, he said. All coming down to this. The blood. The violence. The revenge. Finally ending. Han said it didn't have to be this way. Kenji disagreed. Said it had to. The moment Han killed his brother. The moment he took everything. It had to end in blood. And Kenji noticed her. The wife. Han's greatest weakness. How poetic, he said. How perfect. She'd die watching her husband fall. Or he'd die watching her. One wrong move. Everyone dies. Mexican standoff in a destroyed gallery. Surrounded by shredded art worth millions. Blood already on the floor. More about to spill. And then she saw it. The flanker. The angle. Han wouldn't see in time. Would die. Everything would end. She fired. Shot went wide, not perfect, but forced the flanker into cover. And that broke the stalemate. Bullets everywhere. Gallery becoming hell. Art shredding. Marble cracking. Bodies falling. Rena dropping guards with headshots. Han charging forward, firing as he moved, closing distance. She'd trained for this. Every drill. Every exercise. Now real. Blood. Smoke. Death. But she didn't freeze. Didn't panic. Fought. And then Kenji saw his opening. Han's back. Perfect shot. 20 years of war ending now. She fired. Bullet catching Kenji in shoulder. Spinning him. Shot ruined. Han turned. Saw his opening. Fired 3 times. Center mass. Professional execution. And, just like that, 20 years of war ended. The rival. The enemy. The monster who'd killed Han's first wife. Dead on expensive marble in a destroyed gallery. The remaining forces broke. Leadership gone. Plan failed. Some surrendered. Others ran. None escaped. Rena made sure of that. And then, silence. Or as close to silence as a battlefield gets. Alarms. Sirens. But gunfire stopped. The assault broken. The war won. Han stood over his enemy's corpse. 20 years of revenge. Grief. Violence. All of it ending here. He should feel triumphant. He just felt tired. Amina stood beside him. Covered in smoke and someone else's blood. Pregnant and terrified and having just fought in a war. But alive. They'd survived. He checked her frantically. Any wounds? Any injuries? She said no. Said she was okay. Said they were okay, her and the baby. Both survived. And in that moment, standing in a destroyed gallery, surrounded by corpses, having just killed his greatest enemy, Han broke. Not physically. Emotionally. The walls he'd built for decades crumbling. He told her she saved his life. Again. The debt bride. The property. The woman who was supposed to be his weakness had become his salvation. And he didn't deserve her. Didn't deserve any of it. She told him they deserved each other. Deserved survival. Deserved their chance at something better. And now, with Kenji dead, with the war won, they could take it. Rena confirmed. Jade Dragons broken. Leadership dead. Organization fractured. The other families wouldn't challenge now. Not after this. Han had won. Decisively. Finally. Completely. But as they stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of war, by the bodies of enemies and allies both, by the destruction necessary for survival, Han made his final decision. He'd won, proven his strength, eliminated his greatest enemy. And now he was done. Because the most powerful thing a king can do isn't win the war. It's choose to walk away while still standing. 5 years later. Different city. Different life. Different world entirely. They'd left Black Lotus City 2 years after the war. Methodically. Carefully. Han dismantled his empire piece by piece. Transitioned control to allied families. Liquidated assets. Established legitimate businesses. Made himself unnecessary to the organization he'd built. Amina Kato Han. Age 24. CEO of Lotus Global Security. One of Asia's most respected protection firms. They protected diplomats, corporate executives, high-value targets who needed elite security. And they specialized in something else. Protecting survivors. Women escaping trafficking. Children rescued from exploitation. People who needed someone to believe in them. To defend them. To give them a chance. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman who'd been bought as property, claimed as debt payment, forced into captivity, now protected others from the same fate. Used her skills, violence, strategy, survival, to save people instead of serve criminals. Han, for years old. Speaking 3 languages already. Smart like her mother. Stubborn like her father. Growing up safe. Normal. Far from the world her parents escaped. And Chairman Han. Reformed crime lord. Full-time father. Part-time disaster in the kitchen. They'd settled into domesticity. Morning routines. School runs. Parent-teacher conferences. Everything normal people took for granted. Everything they'd fought for. It looked like a fairy tale ending. And maybe it was. But fairy tales don't tell you about the nightmares. About waking up in cold sweat from dreams of Black Lotus City. About security systems installed to military specifications. About lessons teaching their daughter to run, hide, survive, just in case. About the price of peace. Their daughter asked about scars sometimes. The one on Amina's arm. The ones on Han's knuckles. The stories they didn't tell. The past they'd left behind. Amina told her truth. Simplified. Said she got the scar fighting to protect people she loved. That sometimes life is scary. But you face it anyway. Because that's what makes you strong. And later, after May left for school, driven by bodyguards disguised as normal drivers, because some habits die hard, Han and Amina stood on balcony with coffee. Watching their city. Their safe city. He asked if she missed it. The power. The adrenaline. The absolute control. She said no. Not the violence. Not the fear. But sometimes she missed feeling that alive. That necessary. He said he felt the same. Missed purpose sometimes. Missed mattering in that specific way. Then looked at their daughter's drawings on refrigerator. Remembered what they'd gained. What they'd chosen. Her phone buzzed. New client. Woman escaping trafficking in Manila. Needed extraction. Protection. New identity. Everything Amina specialized in. He told her to go. To save someone. He'd pick up May from school. Would handle dinner. Would be here. Always would be here. And as she coordinated the extraction, calling contacts, arranging safe houses, deploying her team, Amina understood something fundamental. She'd been bought as property. Claimed as payment. Forced into captivity by her father's sins. She'd been broken and rebuilt and trained to survive in a world of monsters. But she'd taken that darkness, that violence, that survival, and transformed it into something that mattered. Something good. She'd become exactly what she needed to become to survive. Then used those skills to help others do the same. The debt bride of Black Lotus City had paid her dues. In blood. In fear. In survival earned through sheer stubborn refusal to stay broken. She'd been property. Became a weapon. Transformed into a protector. And now she was free. Not because someone gave her freedom. Because she took it. Claimed it. Earned it through every fight, every choice, every moment she chose to stand instead of fall. And that made all the difference. Was this a love story? A survival story? A revenge story? Maybe it was all three. Maybe it was something else entirely. Maybe it was just human. So that's the story of the Depp bride. Sold for $8 million. Married in 3 days. Transformed from victim to survivor to warrior to something beyond categories. The question is, what would you have done? Would you have run? Fought? Broken? Survived? There's no right answer. Just human ones. Drop your thoughts in the comments. No judgment. Just real talk. Because these stories? They're about all of us. About what we do when pushed to the edge. About who we become when survival demands transformation. If this story grabbed you and didn't let go, hit that subscribe button. Because every week we bring you stories like this. Dark. Intense. Cinematic. Stories about people pushed to their limits and beyond. Stories about survival. Love. Revenge. Transformation. Stories that make you think and feel and question what you do in impossible situations. This is Afro-Korean Stories TV. Where love, survival, and destiny collide. Where stories grab you by the throat and don't let go until the very last second. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because these stories? They stay with you long after the screen goes dark. See you next week. Stay dangerous.